So we are in the early phases of it and trying to get prepared, make sure we have everything that we need. And I thought maybe what we could do is have Rich take us through all the items that go into our lambing kit and just kind of talk about them one by one. So we're gonna start with the stuff that you have to have. So there's some things that you might need in an emergency or whatever, but there's stuff that you use every single time. Okay, so the first thing that we need to have in our kit is iodine.
So this is Tridine 7. If you can see it. It's a different product. You used to be able to buy iodine. It was a different product. It was more, more potent, I guess, for lack of a better word. But I guess meth addicts and people were buying it, using it for drug manufacturing. So this is the strongest you can get. And what we use this for is we'll put it in this little cup, the shot glass, maybe a quarter of the way up, and then you dip the lamb's navel in it right after they're born. So you're trying to clean the navel cord so that there's no bacteria on it, and prevent bacteria from getting up in there, because it'll serve as a conduit for bacteria to get up into the body cavity of the lamb, and then they'll get an infected navel or worse. So knock on wood, we've never had a problem with that, but we always do that as soon as we, I don't know, what do we do? We feed them first and then we do it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Really, really soon after they're born, which is one of the reasons why we like to be there for when they're born, so that this can get applied as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so the first thing we'll do is we'll trim the navel cord, because it breaks off at different lengths. Sometimes it's 6 to 8 inches long or longer, and then sometimes it's really short. You don't really want that, but you have no control over it a lot of times. So we like to have it maybe an inch and a half long, and then we dip that into the iodine, and that's really the last time we do it.
Yep.
Never had to do it twice. Never had an infection.
So that's probably the most critical thing that we want to make sure is in the kit. Okay, next thing.
Yeah, so these are powdered latex gloves, but it really doesn't matter. The only reason we use gloves is a lot of times when we're fussing around with the sheep, sometimes we have to go in and check to see what position the lamb is in, if there's any issues. And we put the gloves on, and it protects the ewe from getting infection. So the other thing we use in combination with that is they call it super lube. And it lubricates your hand, but it also is a disinfectant. So it keeps you from putting bacteria into the ewe when you're trying to check the lambs, if you have to go in for any reason. Sometimes you have to go in and help deliver, position the lamb differently. So the gloves are used for that, but we always put the lubricant on the outside of the glove, for obvious reasons. Also, when you're handling iodine, it's messy. So when you're putting iodine on the navel cord, you want to wear gloves so that when you take them off, get the wrong way, and your hands don't have iodine stains all over it. Because at the end of lambing season, your hands will be a mess. It doesn't come off easy.
Yeah. Okay.
So those are two good reasons to have gloves. This thing, it's just a normal snot sucker that everybody has that's had babies. You're trying to, when they're born, they have a lot of mucus in their nose or fluids from the lambing. So amniotic fluids. So you want to get that out of there so that they don't inhale it. I don't really know if I'm a complete believer in this, because sometimes you get stuff out. Most of the stuff you can get out of the mouth. Stick it in the mouth, squeeze it out. I think it may help, but you don't get as much out as you would think you would. So I don't even know if it's necessary, it's just something that we do.
Okay. The next thing that we make sure we have in the kit are these kind of low-cost towels.
Yeah, these are important. I like the towels to be rough. So we use towels for everything when you're delivering a lamb or twins or whatever. You want to handle the lamb We usually handle the lamb with a towel so we don't get our smell on the lamb. We don't really want that. It gives you a better grip on the lamb. And also a lot of times if it's cool out, like it is in the spring in April, you want to rub the lamb down, help dry it off faster so it doesn't get cold, because they chill fast in cool temperatures. And it doesn't have to be that cold either for it to be a problem. So we'll use it to dry off the lambs, and then also just to handle and carry the lambs if we need to move it from where they lamb to the pen that we're going to put them in. And then when we're putting the iodine on, we'll use this to hold the lamb. We'll put the iodine on and throw this out afterwards.
Yeah.
So I like them bigger than this. This is pretty small, but it's hard to get big terry cloth towels. But they generally work the best. I find the terry cloth is the best.
We don't get those at our farm supply place, right? We order those. I think they're called bar towels or something.
I've ordered different types. Yeah, I don't know if they even carry that in the Tractor Supply.
Yeah, and I don't know if you said it, but when the lambs are born, they're really slippery. Did you say this? And so it gives you a better grip.
It gives you a better grip, and I like to get a lot of that. Obviously, the ewe can handle that on her own perfectly fine. But there are times when it's really cold and it doesn't hurt. I've never found it to hurt, to help out a little bit.
Okay, awesome. Okay, and the next thing we've got is the Nutri-Drench.
We don't use this very often. I guess it depends on your perspective. Somebody would say, oh, use it every year, so you must use it often. But when you're having 30 lambs a year or whatever you might be having, once in a while you get one or two that's a little bit lethargic, not quite ready. They just didn't seem like they're ready to come out. Maybe they're premature. Whatever the reason is, you give them a blast of this and it gives them instant energy. So once they can get a little bit of energy to go on their own, then they'll eat on their own. You'll just want to get them going faster so they can get their first drink, and then things go a lot better if that happens quickly. You don't want them to go 4 to 6 hours without eating anything on their own. So sometimes we'll milk the ewe and we'll feed the lamb a couple ounces just to get them started. And then other times we'll use this. And this is primarily molasses, propylene glycol, calcium carbonate, choline chloride, D-L-methionine, whatever that is. A lot of vitamins, vitamin E, vitamin A, vitamin D, the normal stuff. Thiamine, a lot of vitamins primarily, but it's the molasses that I think that they respond to. It gives them the instant energy. So you might only use this on 1 or 2 lambs a year, or not at all. Depends on the year.
And you usually just put that in a syringe, right?
Yeah, usually just pull some out with a syringe. Try to give them, 3 milliliters if we can. Usually lasts two or 3. Mm-hmm. And it does work. It helps. If this doesn't help, then you've got other issues, which sometimes happens too. And then you have to figure out what the next step is.
Remember at the one vet we had, he used to always want us to give him Karo syrup. Mm-hmm. We say use Karo syrup, so this is what we said.
I forgot why he said this was hard on their stomach, didn't he?
Yeah, I can't remember. Okay, so that is the must-haves and the stuff that we use fairly regularly.
Why did I never notice there was copper in this? It's interesting. There's copper, and you're not supposed to give sheep supplemental copper. I'm assuming there's a very small amount of it, but
why does it need to be in there?
I don't know why.
Weird.
Well, anyway, we don't overdo it with this. We usually give it to them one time if they need it. They usually respond, and those that don't, those usually require a milking and a supplemental feeding to get them going. 2 or 3 ounces of mother's colostrum.
Okay, well, let's talk about that then. So this is in those cases where we need to administer the colostrum to the lamb if they're not sucking or whatever.
Yeah, usually in the old days what we did is we would take like a 3 milliliter syringe, which is much smaller than this, 1/20th of this, and then we would milk them out into a cup, draw it out, and then drench them with it, which takes forever because you only get like 2 or 3 milliliters at a time. So Jen did some studying to figure out how to tube feed them, because a lot of times when we used to have issues, the vet would come out and tube feed them, and they can give like 6 ounces at a time, which is probably as much as you'd want to give to a newborn. I don't know if they can handle much more than that. So you stick this down the throat into the stomach, you fill this up, which is 60 mLs, and then you put it on, and you can fill up the lamb's stomach with fresh colostrum. It's worked really well to do it. I'm not confident in doing it myself. I've done it a couple times. I just don't like doing it. I'm always afraid I'm going to screw something up and it's going to go in the lungs or something like that. But fortunately, that's not happened so far.
No. It's so awesome because it's so fast. You can, like you said, we just poke and poke and poke, and now you just zip, 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 and with less than a minute, we've got a lamb with a full belly. And you can actually see their little bellies expand as you fill it up with the colostrum.
Yeah, this has helped a lot. Because when you milk a ewe, they usually have a lot of milk when they're first lamb. So you can get 3 ounces out fairly quickly milking the ewe. So that's not the problem. It's the problem how do you get that 3 ounces into the lamb quickly, because really you do want to do it fast. So this works, and generally speaking, most of this goes in to the lamb. I think there's only like that little bit sticking out. It's surprising because this is at least 18 inches long. You wouldn't think all that would go into a little 3 or 4 pound lamb, but it does. But this has been really helpful.
Yeah, that was a breakthrough for us for sure.
So now we tend to do that over doing a NutriDrench because it's fairly easy to get some colostrum, and it's better for the lamb to get the colostrum, so we do that first a lot of times. And then after they've eaten, if they're still not responding, then we might also do the NutriDrench. It also depends on if it's in the middle of the night. We can't stay out there all night because we got things to do. So we want to make things happen as fast as we can so we don't have to babysit them or lamb sit them, as the case might be.
Yeah. So with this, so what we're talking about now are scenarios where things aren't going perfectly. And another thing we have on hand is a scale, a hanging scale, and then this basket that I made, and it's actually from the Mason-Dixon knitting, it's just the bag pattern that they have, their market bag. And the lambs fit in here really perfectly, and they just get immobilized when they're in here, and we hang the scale on it, and we weigh them, and then try to weigh them every 4 hours to see if they're gaining weight, right?
Yeah, I mean, you want them to gain weight every day. So usually we'll weigh them in the morning and then maybe at night, but really you only need to do it once a day just to see if they're progressing. And if you can see that they're gaining weight, then one of the things is you don't always know if they're eating. So we might feed them, and then it looks like they're doing okay, but you don't know if it's because you fed them or because they're eating on their own. So if you weigh them, you can generally tell, yeah, they're eating on their own because they're gaining weight. So that's usually a good indicator, in addition to how they're acting. Usually, a couple hours the lamb's up and acting normally, but not always. Sometimes it takes a couple days before they're really active the way you think they should be. Or way a lot of them are. Some are born a couple hours later, they're running around, jumping in the air. And other times they're just kind of slow and, like I said, lethargic. But once we know they're eating, we don't really fuss with them much. We figure they'll get it eventually. The only time where we have had an issue, I remember one time, we had an older ewe, and she had twins. Everything looked normal. But she had a ewe and a ram. Apparently the ram wasn't eating. We didn't know it. And because it was during the peak of lambing season, it's not like you noticed anything, so you're not like micromanaging the situation. And there was a ewe that always took good care of their lambs and everything, produced a lot of milk, but she was having trouble producing milk that year, and we didn't realize it. And that lamb ended up dying. But fortunately, we figured it out. Too late for him, but his sister probably wasn't eating either. Or if she was eating, she was getting the bulk of the milk, which sometimes happens when one hogs it and the other one's not as strong or whatever and doesn't eat like they should. So that was about the only time I can remember where a lamb really wasn't getting the nutrition that they should have been. So you try and avoid that, and I'm going to say lesson learned there, but we always kind of watch that to make sure they're eating. We see them eating, but sometimes they don't eat often, and you don't happen to be there when they're when they do it to confirm that they're eating. So
that's why the scale is handy. And yeah, like we said, so what I'll do is I'll have a notepad and a pencil in the kit, and every day I try at the same time. And the best practice is if you have any concerns at all, just take a weight. You'll have that baseline weight, so that if things go south the next day, you'll be able to tell whether or not the lamb is eating.
we had a lamb born one time. The ewe had twins. They're both small, premature, whatever they were, I don't know. But the ram lamb was like half the size of the other one. And so we figured he wasn't going to live. He looked like 2 pounds. So we started weighing them to make sure they were growing, and they both were growing. Even though they were both small, and he was particularly small, we knew they were eating and growing because of that. So, it's important to weigh them if you have concerns that you don't think things are going right, something's not right. And it gives you a little bit of peace of mind to know that you don't have to intervene. Because the other option is, well, you could just feed that lamb, bottle feed the lamb, and you don't really want to do that.
We do not like to do bottle feeding.
And I don't know if other breeders have this problem. When we bottle feed, we might bottle feed for 10 weeks. I mean, we want to make sure the lamb's growing properly. And generally they do grow during the bottle feeding, but we've had a low success rate on lambs living. I mean, they might live to be a yearling or even a 2-year-old, but they seem for some reason not to be robust like the naturally fed lambs. I don't know why that is. It's like maybe they don't build up the immunity that they should, so they're not resistant to parasites or infection or whatever the case might be. Mostly parasites, generally, it seems to be. So I don't know why they're getting their shots just like all the other lambs, but they're not getting the antibodies from the colostrum that the other lambs are getting. Even if we feed them, we will feed them to start out with, but it's not the same as getting like full 24 hours worth of colostrum, because they're not getting that generally. It's usually fake colostrum.
Which is what this is, very powder. It's got to be reconstituted with water.
So I don't know why that is. It's weird, but sometimes bottle feeding's the only option you have left. We've had, and the problem is, if you get a premature lamb, they can't even stand on their own because they're so weak. It doesn't happen often. I can only think of like 2 that we've had that were like that. But what's your alternative? They can't stay out in the barn and live. The ewe's going to reject it if it's weak and it's not taking care of itself. So it's not going to live, even if you went out and fed it periodically to get it going. So if there was a way to feed it the mother's milk, leave it in the stall with the mother, and then eventually it gets strong enough to eat on its own, that's what you'd want to do. But we've never found out a way to do that. So as soon as we remove it for a period of time and try and take it back in, we've never had them graft back onto the ewe and start nursing again. The mother won't take it.
Especially if it's cold too and the lamb is immobilized because it can't move. That, because it's not getting the circulation and stuff, its body temperature is going to go down, right? So that's the other thing. In those few circumstances we've had to do it, we brought the lamb in the house and wrapped him up in blankets and stuff and held him up against our chest and stuff to get its body temperature back up.
We had lambs born one time. It was like 35 degrees, maybe 40 in that range. And they were born outside. I was at work, it was raining. And when I got home, I looked out there and I heard the lambs making noises when I went out in the barn to check. So then I saw, okay, there's a little ewe lamb running around. She seemed fine. And then I didn't even know there was another one. So first thing I did is I caught her, found the ewe, because I didn't know which one did it, and then put them in a stall. And then when I was walking back from catching the ewe lamb, I saw there was a ram lamb laying there still on the ground. So I'm like, all right, I didn't see any other ewes that had birthed, so I figured it was from that mother. So I gathered them up, put them in the stall together, and he was ice cold, hardly had a pulse. So I got the ewe eating, she was fine, so I didn't have to worry about that. But I had to figure out how to get the ram going and also get back to work because I was on my lunch break. So I ended up tube feeding him. I got him a couple of ounces, rubbed him off with a towel to try and dry him the best I could, but he still wasn't really responding. So I gave him the Nutri-Drench, and then I'm like, well, I think we got to call this one because he's not responding, and I've never had one that cold and listless. So I covered him with a couple of these towels and left and went back to work. There's really nothing more I could do. I fed him, gave him some Nutri-Drench, dried him the best that I could. There's nice straw in there. I don't know if I got the heat lamp out or not. Probably not at that point. I don't like heat lamps and I don't trust them, but that probably would have been helpful. Anyway, I got home at 5:30 or whatever, went out, and he was running or jumping through the air, and there's nothing wrong with him, like nothing had happened. And I couldn't believe that. I just was really surprised that he came back. So definitely worth having these supplies because they always come in handy, every one of them that we mentioned at some point. I don't really have a recommendation for fake colostrum. I always try to find good colostrum, so if we have to have it, we can use it. We'll try to use colostrum, the actual mother's colostrum, and supplement the first several feedings with that. That gets to be hard though, to go out and milk, keep 3 or 4 ounces at a time. It's pretty hard to do.
Yeah. We also had some times where the mother wasn't producing milk or enough milk, and there was another ewe that had just lambed, and sometimes we would take the other ewe's milk and feed it to the lamb of the mother that wasn't producing milk. So that was another creative. You get really creative when you're in these circles.
Yeah, I mean, it helps when you get two that are born at the same time. We've never been able to successfully graft an orphan onto another one though. And I've heard stories that's worked for people, but I've tried different things and I've never had it work. It'd be nice if it would work, especially if the other ewe had a single and you got one you can get a home for. It'd be nice to be able to graft it onto one of the ewes that's got plenty of milk, and I've not been able to do it so far.
Okay, so another issue, a thing that can go south is the lamb develops diarrhea. And so these are some of the things that we use for that.
Yeah, I'll start with this. I mean, this is the same thing we use. In fact, I could use this right now, as a matter of fact. I didn't know we had this. We just give Pepto-Bismol. It's safe for them. Again, I'll try to get a syringe full into them. You can bottle feed or tube feed that as well, which is better because you can get, quite a bit into them. And it helps depending on what the issue is. A lot of times when they're first born, they're getting that rich colostrum and a lot of milk, and they get too much of it, and then they'll get yellow diarrhea. So depending on what the issue is, this is a pretty general thing that you would use to try and help resolve that. If it's like scours, which is like bacteria related, then you've got to give antibiotics, and it's more difficult to treat. But you can still give this in addition to that. Sometimes you like to cut back on the milk and supplement that with like an electrolyte, which would be this. We use Bounce Back, but there are other brands that are similar. Gives them energy, helps reduce the diarrhea just because you're not giving it as much of that rich milk. So it works mainly when you're bottle feeding because you can control how much milk they're getting, but you can give this to them also. It helps, it's safe. It's mostly dextrose, 50%, glycine, salt, sodium, potassium. Not harmful, it's good for them. Like anything, I don't like to give lambs stuff that they wouldn't normally get. So I limit how much we do that. Not because it's dangerous, because you don't want to change the gut health. You want them to get the natural foods that they would normally get. But sometimes it's absolutely essential that you give them supplemental nutrients.
Okay.
Not often, but sometimes it is.
And then the last thing I have here that I wanted to just show is this is our heat lamp. There's an electrical cable here.
Yeah. So, do you want to plug it in? Most people are familiar with heat lamps. I don't even know what the wattage is on this. I should know, I don't. So this is a maximum of 250 watts. I don't know what this bulb is. You can see it's pretty bright. Gives off a lot of heat. Comes in really handy if you've got particularly cold weather. Maybe you've got some of the other symptoms that we just discussed. The lamb's not quite thrifty. We had this last year. We had 2 lambs born. One was pretty good. He was responding. The ewe was a little bit smaller. She was not responding, so we gave her all the stuff, and it was cold out. And then you could tell they're shaking. They were cold. At least she was more cold than he was. He seemed like he probably would have been fine. So you make sure you got enough dry straw and place for them to snuggle up and conserve heat. And then we said, well, I think we got to do this because she was just too weak. So we found a way to hang this in the stall, and I don't like using them because there's nightmares. Many a barn is burnt down because of using heat lamps. But I think they're mostly the old-fashioned metal frame with the bulb. And then if they fall and get knocked into the straw, they're so hot they're going to set the straw on fire. So this one is designed pretty well. It's plastic, first of all. And you can see the dome grid over it keeps it away from the light. So if it fell in the straw, there'd be some protection, but the straw could still get into the grids here. It could still be a problem. But we kept that out there for almost a week, maybe 5 days or so. And they really liked it. They were crawling underneath it and they were just kind of laying there. Even though, you know, you'd keep it like, I don't know, 3 feet off away from the straw. That's enough heat that they noticed it and they would sleep under it. So that worked really well. And that ewe's doing well.
Oh, she's awesome. Yep. We have both of them still. She was like just standing there with her back kind of hunched, and that was just, I'm glad that Rich intervened on that one. So I think that's it for the basics. So hopefully that helps if if you're thinking about lambing, or you're just curious to see what's involved in the prep work here. So I'm gonna go and take an inventory and see how we are set up for all this stuff and put the order in now. So it's mid-February and we're gonna start lambing in mid-April, so that we'll be sure to have everything that we need when the time comes.
So in a perfect scenario, these are the only things you'd want to use. The rest of the stuff we would never use.
That's right.
Right, these you have to use for every lambing, but the other things you don't need. Well, maybe this too, the snot sucker. We use that every time as well.
It's actually called an aspirator.
Yeah. So those are the things. 90% of the time, this is all that we use. Well, we keep these in our back pocket for in case something happens that you don't expect, and then we'll use those as well. We don't weigh every lamb with a scale. We don't get bounce back. We don't give Nutri-Drench. Every time, it's a very small percentage of time that we break out those emergency tools.
I would say the next thing we use most is the lubricant, because a lot of times you have a single, and then
we often would go in to see if there's another one, because you don't want to say, okay, we got the single, we think there's only one, and then go in the house and then find out there's another one that needs supplemental help that we didn't know about.
Right. And the ewe isn't going to give you any indication, because if it's a single, she's still going to act like she's in labor because she's working on the placenta. So that's when we'll lube up and just go in and do a quick check to see if you can feel a nose and some feet, and if they are in there, we pull on weight. So the scenario this year is a lot better because I'm home full time, so it won't be in the situations that Rich experienced being closer to the house than I was when I was working. So that'll be a lot better too.
Yeah, so there's probably another video in here somewhere where we talk about symptoms, how you can tell when they use close to having, in early stages of labor versus late stages. There's things that we look at, and
I haven't done that. That's a good idea.
There's probably a whole video we could do on that alone. So and then there's those ewes that you think you get, all the symptoms and signs, and then you look out there and nothing's happening. 10 minutes later, you look out, there's 2 lambs that have been born, and you can't possibly understand how that could have happened, because it's usually not the way it works. Usually you have a pretty good feel for how close they are based on their actions.
And their history too, right?
And their history as well.
The same.
But every once in a while, it happened last year. We had 1 or 2 that were outside, I was working from home and I came downstairs and looked out the window and I saw a fresh lamb walking around. It's already walking around and everything, so you know. And yet we'd been watching the ewe and felt pretty confident nothing was happening soon. And there it was. So they used to have it outside. They're the most unpredictable, I think. I don't know why all bets are off if they have it outside, but it seems to be.
What do you mean?
It means that you just can't predict that they're going to have it. Like sometimes they'll start inside and they get too many sheep in there and they'll go outside. That's predictable. But when they're just outside and they're eating or whatever, they're not showing much, and all of a sudden you just plop one out. I don't know why we can't tell that easier that they're going to have one outside. I don't think I've ever seen, well, except for like I said, when they're inside and they walk outside, you already know that they're showing the signs. So if they go outside, you got to keep an eye on them because that will happen. But then there's other ones that just are outside; they don't even come in, and then they just have it outside. Even though you can see them, you can watch them from the window in the kitchen or whatever. But then they might disappear into a blind spot where you can't see them, and then minutes later they have a lamb. I can't explain that. Just it's hard to predict, especially when you're watching them. You don't see really much happening, and all of a sudden you go out there because you can't see them, so you naturally walk out there to see what's going on. And I'm always surprised when they've already had a lamb, even though you've only lost sight of them for 5 minutes. I don't know why that is.
Well, that's another thing too, isn't it? You don't really, if you see a ewe progressing, sometimes if you go out there and insert yourself into the situation, they'll slow down, right? And so you don't want to have that impact on the process either.
Well, that's a funny thing you mentioned because that's a definite thing. I mean, we're to the point where we'll be watching them on our camera, which we'll probably also do an episode on. We can watch them inside because we have cameras in the barn. And so you know where they are, what stage they're in, and they're close. We sometimes let them be born before we go out and move them into their pens, because if we move them into the pens, then it stops the process. They start eating the straw, it's a new environment that throws them off, and they just stop. And you're like, all right, so now you got another hour or two before they resume. I don't know how they can control it, but they do. So a lot of times we'll let them already have one. Then we'll move it in, and then usually the second one is fine.
That's worked out really
because
well.
they start tending to the first one, and they're not paying attention to eating the straw or the environment that they're in or anything. But every time it seems like if we try and stick them in the pen before the lamb's born, it stops everything. The progress stops. We had one ewe. Well, my son and I were out there watching it. She was in labor. She was pushing and the whole thing, advanced labor. We'd go over there to the pen and she would stop. And you could stand there for half an hour and nothing would happen. Then we'd walk all the way across the room and she'd lay down and start pushing again. I don't know how they can stop that natural response that they have, but they do. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, a lot of times we'll just kind of, if the ewe's working, we'll walk away or we'll go around to the other section of the barn or something, so she just feels like she's on her own. They're amazing.
And then there's other ones that don't care. They don't care if you're there. It doesn't make any difference to them. I don't know. It's not like it's an age thing where a younger one's more finicky about it than an older one. A mature one that's had a lot of lambs doesn't seem to really matter. Maybe it is. I don't know. But, all right, that's all I can think of. I mean, it's pretty much everything that. And this is everything. This is everything you need to know about it.
So I'm out in the barn and I just finished chores, and I wanted to just share a couple ideas and thoughts with you guys. The first thing is that I want to start doing a live feed now that I have Wi-Fi set up in the barn. So I'm going to do a live feed every Friday. I'm going to try anyways on Facebook, and I'm going to be trying to do it at 11. Seems like that's a good time. Usually my shipments are all taken care of and chores and everything. And what I'm going to do, I tried it this Friday, is I'll just feed until my battery runs out. And so that's my plan. Let me know what you think. If Facebook is a good platform to do it on, if you guys have another place you'd like me to do it instead. Also, if the content that I'm sharing is what you want, that'll be good. So that's the first thing I wanted to share. And the other thing is, I'm getting a lot of questions about fleeces and stuff, so I thought I would just make a comment about that here. Which is, I think the way I'm gonna market my fleeces this year is I'm gonna put them on my website, which is softshetlandwool.com, as separate listings. And then I'll send an email out to my mailing list. So if you want to get on the mailing list, just go to softshetlandwool.com, scroll to the bottom of the homepage, and there's an email sign up. Or just send me a note or a comment in this video saying that you want to be, but I need your email address. And your first and last name would also be nice, but I don't have to have that. I guess I just want to also thank everybody for your comments, and I really think about you all as I'm doing this, the individuals that I interact with most frequently, and I just really appreciate you reaching out. You know, it's been really fun making friends with everybody. And just so you know, if I don't get a comment from you after a couple videos, I start to worry, and so I'll go check out your Instagram feed just to make sure you're still posting and doing well. So don't feel obligated to comment, but just know that I do care about you and appreciate our friendship. So I think that's it for today. I hope everybody has a great week, and thanks again for watching. I hope you liked today's video. There's nothing to eat. Lucy, where the world? Oh, you can't see her. You've got a little fan club, you know. You do. I can't put the camera lower because they will chew on it. And you know right where the mic is. You're a genius. She's so smart. You have such a soft face. So do you. Brown one is biting my finger. Don't bite me. They only got one row of teeth, so it doesn't hurt, but it's not I do love you. You're just a little too much sometimes. You are. Sorry. And, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Hello there. Okay. Gosh. I like to rub right on this little breastbone here. It's usually how I try to get them to start to like getting attention. This one's got such nice thick neck. Oh, okay. I need more hands. I need someone to come help me. Give some love-ins to my girls. Yes. Alice, Paul, you're such a good girl. You're such a pretty girl. Oh, that tickles. You drive me crazy. Hi, Debbie. Yes, that was Lucy. Oh my goodness, Scotland, awesome. And Karen, I wish you could come out too, because there's a time when I don't have enough hands for everybody to give them all their love-ins. Like you, Lucy. Very demanding.